The first laugh did not echo. It slipped out. A sharp breath. A quick scoff from the back row. Enough to turn heads. By the time the bailiff called the courtroom to order, Carmen Carter already knew what everyone was thinking. She stood alone at the defendant's table in Travis County District Court, shoulders squared but tense, fingers wrapped around a thin manila folder that looked painfully inadequate against the mountain of binders stacked neatly beside the opposing counsel. The navy blazer she wore wasn't hers. Borrowed. Slightly too big. The sleeves hung just past her wrists. No attorney beside her. No whispered strategy. Just her. And across the aisle, watching with open amusement, sat her husband. Garrett Carter leaned back in his chair like a man attending a show he'd already seen. One leg crossed casually over the other. His charcoal suit fit him perfectly. Tailored, expensive, confident. The kind of suit that announced success before he even spoke. When his eyes met Carmen's, his mouth curved upward. It wasn't sympathetic. It wasn't nervous. It was smug. Garrett leaned toward his attorney, David Klein, and whispered something under his breath. David smirked. Garrett shook his head, suppressing a laugh, like Carmen had just confirmed everything he already believed about her. The other attorneys in the gallery exchanged knowing glances. A few spectators whispered. One woman in the third row shook her head slowly, as if watching a tragedy unfold in real time. Carmen didn't react. She stared straight ahead, her breathing measured, her posture deliberate. The judge entered. Everyone stood, then sat. Judge Reynolds adjusted her glasses and scanned the courtroom. Her gaze landed on Carmen, lingering for a moment longer than necessary. "Ms. Carter," the judge said evenly, "you're representing yourself in this matter." The room went silent. Not the kind of silence that falls naturally, but the kind that crashes down like a curtain. Every rustle of paper stopped. Every cough suppressed. Carmen's voice came out steady, clear, no tremor, no hesitation. "Yes, Your Honor." Garrett's smile widened. David Klein stopped writing mid-sentence, his pen hovering above the page. The court reporter's fingers paused mid-keystroke, suspended in disbelief. A paralegal in the back row actually winced, but Carmen's expression didn't change. Her hands remained folded on the table. Her eyes stayed forward. Because behind that calm exterior, a single thought echoed through her mind. He thinks I came unprepared. That's exactly what I wanted. What Garrett didn't know, what no one in that courtroom knew, was that this trial wasn't about winning. It was about destroying the lie he built his life on. And she'd spent 11 months preparing for this moment. Have you ever watched someone underestimate you and said nothing? Carmen never imagined she'd represent herself in court. 2 years earlier, she hadn't imagined standing in a courtroom at all. Her life then looked ordinary, safe, predictable. Married for 11 years in a quiet neighborhood in North Austin. Block parties, school pickups, weekend grocery runs. Family photos framed neatly on the walls. Birthdays celebrated with homemade cakes and candles blown out with wishes that felt real. Garrett worked in commercial real estate. Driven, articulate, magnetic. He knew how to command attention without raising his voice. People listened when he spoke. Clients trusted him. Colleagues respected him. He had the kind of presence that filled rooms before he even entered them. Carmen was different, observant, thoughtful. The kind of woman people underestimated because she didn't announce herself. She noticed patterns others missed, remembered details that seemed insignificant until they weren't. Before Lily was born, Carmen had worked as a paralegal at a mid-sized law firm downtown. She loved the structure of it, the logic, the way details mattered, the satisfaction of finding the one document that changed everything. But after Lily arrived, Garrett suggested she stay home for a while, just until things stabilized. They never did. Garrett's career surged. Promotions, bonuses, travel, conferences in Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, late nights that turned into early mornings. Carmen stayed home. She told herself she was building something, a foundation, a family, a life. At first she told herself she chose it, but slowly, the lines blurred. Garrett took over the finances. "It's just easier," he said. "I deal with numbers all day. Let me handle it." Carmen agreed. Trust came easily when it was wrapped in marriage, when it wore the face of someone who promised forever. Over time, Garrett grew distant. Not cold, not cruel, just absent. Like a shadow that moved through rooms without ever touching anything. Late nights became the norm. Frequent trips stretched longer. Phone calls were taken outside. Car doors closing just a little too quickly. Carmen started to feel like a guest in her own life. Like she was living in a house someone else had designed, following rules she'd never agreed to. She blamed herself for feeling ungrateful, for questioning a man who provided everything, for wondering why love felt like loneliness. She'd sit at the kitchen table after Lily went to bed, scrolling through old photos, trying to remember when things changed, trying to pinpoint the exact moment she stopped recognizing herself. Have you ever doubted yourself because someone else convinced you to? The first lie wasn't the affair. It was convincing her she didn't need to understand the truth. It was teaching her that questions were paranoia, that curiosity was distrust, that wanting to know was the same as not believing. One night, while folding laundry, Carmen found a receipt in Garrett's jacket pocket. A high-end restaurant downtown. 2 entrees, 2 cocktails, a dessert they used to share on anniversaries. The date matched a night Garrett had told her he'd been stuck in meetings. Her stomach tightened. Her hands froze mid-fold. She stared at the receipt for a long time, trying to make it mean something else. Trying to find an explanation that didn't require her to question everything. When she showed him the receipt later that evening, he sighed. Not guilty, but irritated, like she'd interrupted something important with something trivial. "Carmen, you're overthinking. I took a client out. This paranoia, it's not healthy." His voice was calm, reasonable, the kind of tone that made her feel small for even asking. She apologized. Later that night, she cried silently in the bathroom so Lily wouldn't hear. The tile was cold against her knees. The mirror reflected a woman she barely recognized. But something shifted. Carmen stopped confronting. She started observing. She noticed patterns. Late-night texts that lit up his phone screen in the dark. Cologne she didn't recognize lingering on his shirts. Receipts that didn't add up. Dinners for 2 when he claimed to be alone. Hotel charges in cities he never mentioned visiting. A bank notification on his phone for an account she'd never seen. When she asked about it, Garrett laughed. Not meanly, but dismissively. "You're worrying again. I move money around all the time. Business accounts. You wouldn't understand the structure." The word understand landed heavier than he intended. It wasn't just a word. It was a verdict. A reminder of her place. A door closing. Carmen didn't push. She rarely did. But she started keeping notes, dates, times, details, small inconsistencies that grew into patterns, patterns that formed a picture she wasn't ready to see. She bought a small notebook. kept it hidden in the bottom drawer of her nightstand. Wrote in shorthand, just in case. She didn't know why. Instinct, maybe. Or survival. She didn't know it yet. But that receipt would become evidence. And those notes would become a timeline. Have you ever ignored a red flag you wish you hadn't? The truth revealed itself by accident. Carmen and Lily returned early from a birthday party across town. The bounce house had deflated. The host's dog had gotten loose. Everyone left early. The house was unusually quiet when they walked in. No music, no television, no sound at all. Then Carmen heard laughter upstairs. A woman's laugh. Light, familiar, intimate. Her steps slowed as she climbed the stairs, heart pounding hard enough to drown out every other sound. Her hands gripped the railing. Her breath came shallow. The bedroom door wasn't fully closed. Inside, Garrett wasn't alone. The woman wrapped in Carmen's bedsheets, the ones she'd washed that morning, hung to dry in the sun, wasn't a stranger. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. Carmen had met her before. Company parties, holiday gatherings. Sarah had hugged her, complimented her cooking, laughed at her jokes. Garrett didn't panic when he saw Carmen standing in the doorway. He looked relieved. "I didn't want you finding out like this," he said calmly, as if discussing weekend plans. "But I guess it's time." Time. As if this moment had been scheduled. As if betrayal had a calendar entry. "I'm filing for divorce," Garrett continued, his voice steady, measured. "I've already spoken to my attorney. Papers will be served next week." Carmen's hands trembled. Her vision blurred at the edges. That's when she understood. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It wasn't even about desire. It was a plan. Garrett had orchestrated this. The affair, the timing, the reveal. He'd been preparing to leave, and he wanted her to know, needed her to know, that he'd been in control the entire time. He'd been planning her exit from his life with the same precision he used to close real estate deals. Sarah didn't speak. She looked away, pulling the sheet higher. Guilt flickered across her face, but she didn't apologize. She didn't move. Carmen picked up Lily, who'd been standing frozen in the hallway, clutching her goodie bag, and left. She didn't cry. Not yet. Because the shock was still settling. Because her daughter was watching. Because some pain is too big to process all at once. But the affair wasn't the worst betrayal. The worst part came after. When Carmen realized Garrett hadn't just betrayed her love. He'd been dismantling her life piece by piece, and she'd never seen it coming. Garrett moved fast. Ruthlessly fast. Within days, Carmen was served. Not just divorce papers, claims for control of marital assets, motions to limit her access to accounts, requests for sole decision-making authority over Lily. The documents painted a version of her life she barely recognized. According to Garrett, the house was purchased primarily with his earnings. Savings were business-related. Investments untouchable. Carmen's contributions, years of managing a home, raising a child, supporting his career, were rendered invisible. She was offered a settlement that wouldn't last a year, maybe less. When she protested, Garrett leaned back in his chair during the first mediation, calm and certain. "You don't have income," he said, his voice neutral, factual. "You don't have a lawyer. Fighting this will only hurt you, and it'll hurt Lily." He said her daughter's name like a warning. Sarah moved into a downtown condo shortly after. Garrett moved in with her. The condo had floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the skyline. Carmen saw photos on social media before she blocked them both. Then the lawsuits started. Garrett sued Carmen for defamation, for interference with business relationships, for damages stemming from false allegations. Carmen didn't understand the strategy at first. She hadn't made allegations, hadn't posted anything, hadn't told anyone outside of 2 close friends. Until she realized he didn't care if he won. He was draining her. Every filing cost money. Every motion required a response. Every delay pushed her closer to bankruptcy. Every court date meant taking time she didn't have, spending money she didn't possess. Carmen tried to hire an attorney. She contacted 8 different firms. Every consultation ended the same way. How will you pay? Garrett had frozen joint accounts, challenged temporary support, delayed hearings, filed continuances, stalled discovery. One attorney, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a tired voice, didn't sugarcoat it. He's trying to outspend you, she said. And he probably will. I've seen this before. Men with resources use the system as a weapon. Unless you have money or family support, this is an uphill battle. Carmen sat in her car afterward, staring at the steering wheel. Rain streaked the windshield. The parking garage smelled like exhaust and defeat. She had $847 in her personal account. No credit cards Garrett hadn't canceled. No income. No family nearby. No help. If this were happening to you, would you fight or give up? That night, after Lily fell asleep, Carmen opened a box in the closet. Inside were notebooks from her paralegal days, legal pads covered in shorthand, case notes from trials she'd assisted on, margins filled with reminders, statutes, procedural rules. She hadn't touched them in years. But she hadn't forgotten. She pulled them out one by one, spreading them across the dining room table. The paper smelled old. The ink had faded in places, but the knowledge was still there. Garrett thought the money would silence her. He didn't realize it would force her to remember who she used to be. Carmen read late into the night. Every night. Court procedures, filings, precedents, discovery rules, evidence protocols, deadlines, objections, motions to compel. She didn't tell anyone. Garrett assumed she was defeated, broken, drowning. When he heard she planned to represent herself, he laughed openly during the second mediation. "This should be entertaining," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You always liked pretending you understood things." David Klein, his attorney, didn't even try to hide his smirk. Carmen didn't respond, didn't defend herself, didn't argue. Because she wasn't preparing to argue. She was preparing to expose. She filed her first motion pro se, a request for financial records. Then another, subpoenas for bank statements. Then another, corporate filings, tax returns, wire transfer records. Garrett's attorney objected to everything. Too broad, too burdensome, irrelevant. But Carmen knew the rules. She cited statutes, procedures, deadlines. She quoted case law. She filed responses within hours, not days. Slowly, documents started arriving. Piecemeal at first, redacted, incomplete. Carmen filed motions to compel, requested sanctions for non-compliance, threatened contempt proceedings. More documents came, tax returns showing income, Garrett claimed didn't exist. Wire transfers dated months before the affair was revealed. Corporate filings for LLCs she'd never heard of. Carmen spread them across the dining room table and started connecting the dots. Post-it notes, highlighters, timelines written on poster board, shell companies registered under vague names, accounts under Sarah's name, opened 2 years ago, transfers moving money in careful increments, just under reporting thresholds. Garrett had been hiding assets. Not recently, for years. And he'd been preparing to divorce Carmen long before she ever found out about Sarah. The affair wasn't the crime. It was the cover story. The distraction. The thing that made her look paranoid, emotional, unstable. Carmen didn't sleep much, but when she did, she slept with clarity. She wasn't preparing to win a divorce. She was preparing to reveal the truth, to pull back the curtain on the life Garrett had built, brick by hidden brick. Back in the courtroom, weeks later, Garrett's side went first. David Klein stood and spoke smoothly, his voice polished and confident. He painted a picture. Carmen as unstable, emotional, unfit to manage finances. A woman clinging desperately to a failed marriage, refusing to accept reality. He described Garrett as the responsible party, the earner, the provider, the victim of Carmen's refusal to move on with dignity. Judge Reynolds listened without expression, taking notes occasionally. Then it was Carmen's turn. She stood, hands steady, voice clear. No notes. No trembling. Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit A. The screen behind her lit up. Emails. Dozens at first. Then hundreds. Screenshots, PDFs, spreadsheets, financial transfers. Shell companies with names like Redstone Holdings, LLC, and Apex Capital Group. Accounts under Sarah's name. Dates going back 3 years. The courtroom fell silent. Not polite silence. Shocked silence. These emails show deliberate concealment of marital assets, Carmen said evenly, her tone neutral, factual, and systematic misrepresentation of income and holdings to avoid equitable distribution. Garrett's smile disappeared. His jaw tightened. His hands gripped the armrests. David Klein stopped writing. His pen hovered mid-air, frozen. Judge Reynolds leaned forward, her eyes scanning the screen. Ms. Carter, the judge said slowly, where did you obtain these documents? Through legal discovery, Your Honor. Cross-referenced with public corporate filings available through the Texas Secretary of State and banking records subpoenaed under Texas Family Code Section 6.408. David Klein stood abruptly. Your Honor, we were not provided advance notice of this evidence because your client delayed discovery for 8 months, Carmen interrupted calmly, her voice cutting through his objection. All filings were submitted within statutory deadlines. Copies were provided to opposing counsel via certified mail on November 14th. Judge Reynolds looked at David Klein. Is that accurate, Mr. Klein? David Klein's face flushed. He sat down slowly. We'll need time to review. You've had time, Carmen said. The evidence shows my husband created multiple LLCs to hide income, transferred assets to his coworker, Miss Sarah Mitchell, and filed false financial affidavits in this court under penalty of perjury. Garrett's jaw tightened. His hands gripped the armrests so hard his knuckles turned white. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. A reporter in the back row typed furiously. Did you expect her to have this much evidence? But Carmen hadn't touched the most dangerous truth yet. She was just getting started. Carmen turned to the judge, her voice calm but firm. "Your Honor, I'd like to call a witness." David Klein shot to his feet. "Objection. We weren't informed of any witnesses." "The witness was listed in my pretrial filing 3 weeks ago," Carmen said, pulling a document from her folder. "Page 7, line 18, filed and served on December 1st. Judge Reynolds checked her notes, flipping through pages. "Overruled. Call your witness, Ms. Carter." Carmen's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "I call Sarah Mitchell." Gasps echoed through the courtroom, loud, unrestrained. Garrett's head snapped toward the door, his eyes wide. Sarah entered slowly, pale and shaking. Her hands trembled. She avoided Garrett's eyes as she took the stand, staring straight ahead as if looking at him would turn her to stone. The bailiff swore her in. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Carmen approached, her movements deliberate. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "Ms. Mitchell, do you have accounts in your name containing assets that belong to my husband?" Sarah's hands trembled in her lap. She glanced at Garrett, then at the judge, then down. "Yes." "And did my husband ask you to hold those assets to hide them from me during divorce proceedings?" Sarah's voice cracked. "Yes." The courtroom erupted. Whispers became shouts. Someone gasped. A man in the gallery said, "No way," out loud. Garrett stood suddenly, his chair scraping loudly. "Objection! This is—" "Sit down, Mr. Carter," Judge Reynolds said sharply, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You are not an attorney in these proceedings." Garrett sat slowly, his face red, his breathing visible. Carmen continued, her voice steady. "Ms. Mitchell, when did you realize my husband planned to frame you for his financial crimes?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Her voice shook. "When he sued you. His attorney, Mr. Klein, told me I'd be held liable if you discovered the accounts. He said I could face charges for holding hidden assets. That's when I knew Garrett was going to blame me for everything. Make it look like I manipulated him." David Klein's face went pale. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Carmen didn't raise her voice, didn't gloat. "Your Honor, I have signed affidavits from Miss Mitchell detailing the transfers, dates, and amounts. Along with immunity agreements she's negotiated with the Travis County District Attorney's Office." Judge Reynolds sat back, her expression unreadable. "The district attorney is involved?" "As of last week, Your Honor. Charges are pending review for fraud, perjury, and loss and concealment of assets." Garrett's face drained of color. His attorney leaned in, whispering urgently. Carmen stood perfectly still, her hands folded. And then the judge asked for a forensic audit. The courtroom exploded. The audit took 6 weeks. When the findings came back, they were devastating. Hidden accounts totaling over $900,000. False tax filings spanning 4 years. Corporate fraud involving 3 shell companies. Asset manipulation dating back 5 years. Long before Sarah, long before the affair, long before Carmen ever suspected anything. The defamation lawsuit against Carmen was dismissed with prejudice. The divorce settlement was voided. A new settlement was ordered, this time favoring Carmen. Garrett's assets were frozen pending criminal investigation. His real estate license was suspended. His firm launched an internal review. Clients started pulling contracts. His name appeared in the Austin American-Statesman under the headline, "Local Realtor Faces Fraud Charges in Divorce Case." Sarah testified before a grand jury. She was granted immunity in exchange for full cooperation. Garrett was indicted on 4 counts: fraud, perjury, money laundering, and filing false statements. Carmen sat quietly through every hearing. No triumphant smile, no vindictive statements, no interviews with reporters who called her phone daily. Just calm composure. When reporters cornered her outside the courthouse, asking how she felt, she said only, "I wanted the truth, that's all." Garrett avoided her eyes every time they were in the same room. He couldn't face her, couldn't look at the woman he'd tried to erase, because he'd spent years teaching her to doubt herself, and she'd used that time to learn how to destroy him. Winning didn't feel the way she expected. It didn't feel triumphant. It didn't feel satisfying in the way movies promised. It felt quiet, like finally setting down something heavy she'd been carrying for years, like exhaling after holding her breath for too long. Months later, the divorce was finalized. Carmen was awarded a fair settlement. Full custody of Lily with supervised visitation for Garrett. The house in North Austin. Half of the recovered assets. Restitution for legal costs. She returned to work, this time as a legal consultant helping women navigate complex divorces. Women who couldn't afford attorneys. Women who'd been told they had no options. She understood them. She'd been them. Garrett's career unraveled completely. His reputation shattered beyond repair. He settled the criminal charges with a plea deal, probation, restitution, community service, and a permanent record. His real estate license was revoked. His firm severed ties. Friends stopped returning calls. Sarah disappeared. No forwarding address. No social media. Gone. Carmen didn't celebrate. She didn't post about it. She didn't need to. She and Lily moved into a smaller home near a good school. They planted a garden in the backyard. Tomatoes, basil, sunflowers. Lily painted her new bedroom purple. They adopted a dog from the shelter, a scruffy terrier mix named Biscuit. Life became small again, but this time, small felt like freedom. Sometimes, Carmen thought about that smile in the courtroom, the one that didn't last, the one Garrett wore when he thought she'd already lost. She thought about the years she'd spent doubting herself, apologizing, shrinking, accepting less, believing she deserved less. And she thought about the moment she stopped begging and started preparing. One afternoon, while Lily played outside with Biscuit, Carmen stood on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching clouds drift across a sky so blue it hurt to look at. No regrets, no bitterness, just peace. Because the most dangerous thing Garrett ever underestimated wasn't Carmen's intelligence. It was her patience, her willingness to wait, to watch, to learn, to prepare in silence while he celebrated in noise. Some revenge isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It's quiet, methodical, precise, and it waits until the moment you think you've already won. Carmen stepped back inside. She had work in the morning, clients who needed help, women who felt the way she once did, small, powerless, invisible, and she'd be there, ready, prepared, because she knew something now that she hadn't known before. The most powerful weapon isn't anger, it's clarity. Clarity about who you are, what you're capable of, what you refuse to accept. Clarity is the difference between surviving and winning, and Carmen had spent 11 months building hers. If this story made you feel something, subscribe. We tell the stories people are afraid to hear, The ones that remind you to never underestimate someone just because they stopped fighting back. Was this justice or revenge? Drop your answer in the comments.